The massive alien ship descended through Earth's cloudy sky like a silver mountain falling from the heavens. Its hull gleamed with strange metals that seemed to bend light around them, and weapons bristled from every surface like the spines of some cosmic beast. The ship was longer than 3 city blocks and twice as wide, casting a shadow that turned the sole morning into artificial night. Commander Thexval stood on the bridge, his forearms crossed behind his back as he watched the primitive planet grow larger on the main screen. His purple skin bore the ritual scars of 1,000 battles, and his yellow eyes had seen the surrender of countless worlds. This would be no different. The intelligence reports were clear. Earth was inhabited by a young species that had barely mastered spaceflight. They fought among themselves with crude weapons and seemed obsessed with accumulating worthless pieces of paper they called money. "Sir," his lieutenant reported, "the humans are responding to our communication requests." "Put them through," Thexval commanded, expecting to hear the usual mix of fear and desperate bargaining that marked first contact with primitive species. Instead, a calm human voice filled the bridge. "Good morning. This is Air Traffic Control. Please follow the designated flight path to Landing Zone 7. You'll be met by our diplomatic team upon arrival." Thexval's mandibles clicked in confusion. Air traffic control? Flight paths? These creatures were treating his warship like some common transport vessel. He had expected panic, perhaps attempts to flee or fight. Instead, they were giving him directions as if he were a lost tourist. "Tell them we will land where we choose," he growled. "I'm sorry," the human voice replied politely, "but unauthorized landing sites would violate several safety regulations. Insurance wouldn't cover any accidents, I'm sure you understand." "Insurance? Regulations?" Thexval felt his blood pressure rising. "We are the Galactic Empire. We do not follow your primitive laws." "Of course not," the human said agreeably. "But the landing zone has better facilities for beings of your obvious importance, much more comfortable than an empty field." Despite himself, Thexval found this reasoning sound. The Empire deserved proper treatment after all. "Very well. We will use your designated area." The landing zone turned out to be a gleaming platform surrounded by towering buildings made of glass and steel. As the ship's ramp lowered, Thexval adjusted his ceremonial armor and checked his plasma sword. Behind him marched 50 of his finest warriors, their weapons ready and their faces set in expressions of grim authority. But instead of cowering humans or desperate military forces, they were met by 3 individuals in dark, perfectly fitted clothing. The garments were strange, not armor, not robes, but something in between. Each human carried a rectangular black case and wore their hair neat and clean. They stood perfectly straight like soldiers, but without any visible weapons. The one in the center, a human male with graying hair at his temples, stepped forward with a slight bow. "Welcome to Earth," he said, in accented but clear galactic standard. "I am Kim Dae-ho, Chief Executive Officer of Terrasol Corporation. These are my colleagues, Park Jin-woo, our Chief Financial Officer, and Lee So-young, our Chief Legal Counsel." Thexval blinked his 4 eyes in sequence, a sign of deep confusion among his species. Where were the soldiers? The weapons? The desperate pleas for mercy? These humans stood before an invasion force as calmly as if they were greeting dinner guests. "I am Commander Thexval of the Galactic Empire," he announced, his voice echoing across the platform. "We are here to accept your planet's immediate and unconditional surrender." Kim Dae-ho nodded thoughtfully, as if this were a reasonable business proposal. "I see. That's certainly one approach. Perhaps we should discuss the details in a more comfortable setting. Our offices have excellent climate control and refreshment facilities." "This is not a negotiation," Thexval roared, his plasma sword humming to life. "Surrender or be destroyed." "Of course," Park Jin-woo agreed mildly, adjusting what appeared to be some kind of optical enhancement device over his eyes. "But surely even unconditional surrender requires some paperwork. Documentation? We wouldn't want any confusion later, Lee." So-young opened her black case and removed a thin rectangular device. "I've prepared some preliminary agreements, nothing complex, just standard terms and conditions. Liability waivers, environmental impact assessments, that sort of thing." Thexval felt his certainty wavering. In 300 years of conquest, no species had ever offered to help with the paperwork of their own subjugation. These humans were treating the invasion of their world like some kind of business transaction. "Come," Kim Dae-ho said, gesturing toward the nearest glass tower. "Let's get out of this heat. I believe you'll find our hospitality quite thorough." As they walked toward the building, Thexval couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. The humans moved with quiet confidence, their steps measured and purposeful. They carried themselves like warriors, but warriors unlike any he had ever encountered. Their weapons were briefcases, their armor was cloth, and their battlefield was apparently a building filled with desks and chairs. For the first time in his long military career, Commander Thexval wondered if he was walking into a trap. But what kind of trap could be set by creatures who offered climate control and refreshments to their conquerors? The elevator moved so smoothly that Commander Thexval barely felt it climbing toward the 50th floor. The walls were made of polished metal that reflected his purple face back at him from dozens of angles. Soft music played from hidden speakers, the kind of gentle sounds that somehow made his battle-hardened nerves feel strangely calm. His 50 warriors crowded behind him, their weapons still ready, but their eyes kept darting around at the strange, human environment. When the doors opened, they stepped into a world unlike anything Thexval had seen on 1,000 conquered planets. The floor was covered in thick, soft material that absorbed the sound of their heavy boots. The walls were lined with moving pictures that showed numbers and symbols constantly changing. Humans in those same dark suits moved quietly between workstations, speaking in low voices into small devices pressed against their ears. "This way, please," Kim Dae-ho said, leading them down a corridor lined with glass-walled rooms where more suited humans sat around tables, talking and pointing at glowing screens. "The main conference room is just ahead." The conference room itself was larger than most warship bridges. A table made of dark, polished wood stretched down the center, surrounded by chairs that looked more comfortable than the command throne on Thexval's flagship. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a view of the entire city sprawling below. Millions of humans going about their daily lives as if an alien invasion fleet wasn't parked just outside their door. "Please, sit wherever you're comfortable," Lee So-young said, taking her place at one end of the table. Park Jin-woo sat beside her, already removing papers from his black case. Kim Dae-ho took the chair directly across from where Thexval stood. The alien commander remained standing, his forearms crossed in a gesture of authority. His warriors spread out along the walls, their weapons creating an impressive display of imperial might. "There will be no sitting," he declared. "You will sign this surrender document immediately." From his belt, he pulled out a single sheet of metallic paper, the standard imperial surrender form that had been signed by over 3,000 species. It was simple, direct, and left no room for argument. Total submission to imperial rule, immediate cessation of all military activities, and full access to planetary resources. Kim Dae-ho accepted the document and read it carefully, his expression thoughtful. Then he passed it to Park Jin-woo, who studied it with the same attention before handing it to Lee So-young. She read it twice, making small notes with a writing instrument. "This is quite comprehensive," she said finally. "Though I notice some areas that might need clarification." Thexval's mandibles clicked impatiently. "There is nothing to clarify. You surrender completely, or we destroy your world." "Of course," Park Jin-woo agreed, pushing his optical devices higher on his nose. "But according to Galactic Trade Regulation 847b, any species with established interplanetary commerce cannot be forcibly annexed without proper economic assessment procedures." The alien commander stared at him. "What did you say?" Lee So-young opened her case and pulled out a thick book bound in blue material. "The Galactic Commerce Code, Section 12, Subsection 4. Any species that has achieved Level 3 economic development status is entitled to negotiated integration rather than forced annexation. That law hasn't been used in over 400 years, Thexval protested. "But it's still valid," Kim Dae-ho said mildly. "We achieved Level 3 status 6 months ago when we established trade agreements with the Centauri Mining Consortium and the Vegan Agricultural Cooperative. More papers appeared on the table. Trade agreements, shipping manifests, economic reports, all bearing official galactic commerce stamps and signatures. Thexval felt his certainty beginning to crack like ice under pressure. Furthermore, Lee So-young continued, "Your standard surrender document contains 17 procedural violations under current Imperial military code. Nothing that can't be fixed, naturally, but it would require a complete rewrite." She produced another book, this one bound in red, and began pointing to specific passages. Military regulations that Thexval himself had helped write decades ago, but which had been updated and modified so many times that even he had lost track of all the changes. For instance, Park Jin-woo added, Section 445 requires a 30-day environmental impact study before any military occupation of a Class M planet, and Article 12 mandates cultural preservation protocols for any species with recorded history spanning more than 5,000 years. Humans have been recording their history for over 10,000 years, Kim Dae-ho noted. Quite fascinating, really. We'd be happy to share our archives with your cultural research teams. Hours passed. What should have been a simple surrender ceremony turned into a maze of regulations, procedures, and legal requirements. Every time Thexval thought he had found a way forward, the humans produced another document, another regulation, another requirement that needed to be satisfied. They were unfailingly polite. They offered him water, food, even a more comfortable chair. But with each passing hour, the simple conquest of Earth became more complicated. Environmental assessments, cultural preservation protocols, economic integration studies, worker protection agreements. The paperwork grew into towering stacks. By the time the sun began to set outside the great windows, Thexval found himself signing documents he barely understood. Agreements for temporary administrative transition and cooperative resource management, and mutual defense coordination. When his warriors finally left the building, their weapons still unused, the alien commander realized something disturbing. He wasn't sure if Earth had surrendered to the Empire, or if the Empire had somehow agreed to become business partners with Earth. The humans in their strange suits had turned his invasion into a corporate merger, and he couldn't figure out exactly how they had done it. 3 days passed after the strange meeting in the glass tower. Commander Thexval paced his ship's bridge, his forearms moving in agitated patterns as he tried to make sense of what had happened. The paperwork from the humans sat in neat stacks on his command table, each document more confusing than the last. Words like subsidiary agreements and joint venture partnerships swirled in his mind like poison. His communication officer looked up from her station with worried eyes. "Sir, we're receiving messages from Imperial Command. They're asking for status reports on the Earth conquest." Thexval's mandibles clicked in frustration. How could he explain that Earth hadn't exactly surrendered, but hadn't exactly refused either? The humans had somehow turned his invasion into a business meeting that never seemed to end. Every answer they gave created 10 new questions, and every solution required more forms to fill out. "Enough," he growled, his patience finally snapping. "Open a channel to the planet's surface." The main screen flickered to life, showing Kim Dae-ho sitting calmly in his office chair. The human was still wearing one of those dark suits, and he looked as fresh and unworried as if he'd been discussing the weather instead of planetary invasion. "Commander," Kim Dae-ho said pleasantly, "I trust you've had time to review our preliminary agreements." "I've had enough of your games," Thexval snarled. "Perhaps you need a demonstration of Imperial power to help you understand your situation." "Oh dear," the human replied, his eyebrows rising slightly. "I hope we haven't caused any confusion. We're quite committed to finding a mutually beneficial arrangement." "Mutually beneficial?" Thexval's voice rose to a roar. "You will surrender unconditionally, or I will show you what happens to worlds that waste Imperial time." He cut the communication and turned to his weapons officer. "Target the human mining station in orbit. Reduce it to atoms." "Yes, sir." The ship's main cannon charged with a sound like thunder. Energy beams lanced out across space, striking the small human facility. The mining station disappeared in a brief flash of light and debris, leaving nothing but scattered metal fragments floating in the void. "There," Thexval said with satisfaction. "Now they understand that business hours are over." His triumph lasted exactly 6 hours and 12 minutes. "Sir," his communications officer called out, her voice tight with worry, "we're receiving emergency signals from the Third Fleet." "What kind of emergency?" "Their fuel suppliers have just canceled all contracts, something about market instability and creditworthiness concerns." Thexval frowned. "Find other suppliers." "Sir, that's the problem. Every major fuel company in the sector has simultaneously declared bankruptcy. Their assets are being liquidated to pay off debts to something called Terrasol Energy Holdings." The alien commander felt a cold chill run down his spine. "What about our weapons manufacturers?" "Also filing for bankruptcy, sir. Apparently, their supply chains have collapsed overnight. Raw materials, component parts, shipping contracts, and everything has just stopped." The main screen activated without being called, showing Kim Dae-ho's office again. But this time, Park Jin-woo sat beside him reading from a tablet device. Lee So-young stood behind them, her arms full of legal documents. "Commander," Kim Dae-ho said, his voice carrying the same polite tone as before, "we're terribly sorry about the supply chain disruptions affecting your fleet. Market forces can be quite unpredictable, I'm afraid." "What have you done?" Thexval demanded. "Done?" Park Jin-woo looked up from his tablet with innocent confusion. "We've simply been managing our business interests. Terrasol Corporation has been quite active in the galactic commodities market lately. You destroyed our suppliers." "Not destroyed," Lee So-young corrected gently. "Acquired. There's a significant difference from a legal standpoint." "You see," Kim Dae-ho explained, "when you demonstrated your military capabilities earlier today, several of our business partners became concerned about the stability of Imperial-controlled supply chains. They requested immediate buyout options to protect their investments." Thexval's yellow eyes widened as the implications sank in. "You're saying the destruction of one mining station caused this?" "Market confidence is a delicate thing," Park Jin-woo said sympathetically. "When investors see military action disrupting commerce, they tend to seek more stable alternatives. Terrasol Corporation was happy to provide those alternatives. We also took the liberty of calling in some outstanding debts," Lee So-young added. Amazing how many Imperial military contractors had borrowed money from Earth financial institutions over the past few months. When they couldn't pay, well, standard bankruptcy procedures applied. On his tactical display, Thexval watched in horror as more reports flooded in. The 7th Fleet was stranded without fuel. The 4th Armada's weapons were failing as replacement parts became unavailable. Communication networks were shutting down as their operators declared insolvency. "This is impossible," he whispered. "We are the Galactic Empire. We have conquered 1,000 worlds." "Of course you have," Kim Dae-ho agreed. "And you've done it very efficiently. But you've also created quite extensive supply chains and economic dependencies. When those systems are disrupted, well," he gestured to his colleagues, who began reading from their tablets and documents. Numbers flooded the screen: trade agreements, shipping contracts, financial instruments, and debt obligations. A web of commerce that connected every corner of the empire, all of it somehow linked to companies that bore the Terrasol logo. "The good news," Kim Dae-ho continued, "is that we're prepared to offer emergency support services to help restore normal operations. Our terms are quite reasonable, all things considered." Thexval stared at the humans in their neat suits, finally understanding the truth. They hadn't fired a single weapon, but they had crippled the mightiest military force in the galaxy. They had turned the Empire's own economic system into a weapon and aimed it at itself. These weren't merchants playing at war. These were warriors who had evolved beyond the need for plasma cannons and battle fleets. Their weapons were contracts, and their ammunition was money. And they had just won the first battle of a war that Thexval was only beginning to understand. The emergency hologram chamber aboard the Imperial flagship hummed with dangerous energy as Emperor Krexthor materialized in the center of the room. His massive form towered over even Commander Thexval, and his 3 golden eyes blazed with fury that could melt steel. The Emperor's ceremonial robes rippled with power circuits that sparked and crackled with his anger. "Explain," the Emperor commanded, his voice like grinding stone. "How has a single primitive world brought the greatest military force in galactic history to its knees?" Around the hologram chamber, the Empire's highest-ranking officials stood in uncomfortable silence. Fleet Admiral Nextall shifted nervously, his usually perfect uniform wrinkled from days of crisis management. General Kortham kept his 4 eyes fixed on the floor, unable to meet his Emperor's terrible gaze. Even the dreaded intelligence director, Vexiron, seemed smaller than usual, his confidence shattered by reports that made no sense. Commander Thexaval stepped forward, his purple skin pale with exhaustion. "Your Majesty, the humans are unlike any species we have encountered. They do not fight with weapons or ships, they fight with documents. The Emperor's middle eye twitched, a sign of barely controlled rage. "You're telling me that papers have defeated my armadas?" Before Thexaval could answer, the chamber's communication system activated. On the main screen, Kim Dae-ho appeared, sitting calmly behind his wooden desk. Park Jin-woo sat to his right, a tablet device in his hands. Lee So-young stood behind them, carrying her familiar black case filled with mysterious papers. "Your Imperial Majesty," Kim Dae-ho said with a respectful bow of his head. "It's an honor to finally meet you directly. I am Kim Dae-ho, Chief Executive, Officer of Terrasol Corporation." The Emperor's roar shook the entire chamber. "You dare address me, insect? You will surrender immediately or watch your world burn." "Of course, Your Majesty," Kim Dae-ho replied calmly. "Though I believe there may be some misunderstanding about the current situation. Perhaps my colleague could clarify the details." Park Jin-woo looked up from his tablet, his optical devices reflecting the chamber's lights. "Over the past 18 months, Terrasol Corporation and its subsidiary companies have acquired controlling interests in several key Imperial assets." He began reading from his screen in a voice as steady as a machine. 47 military contractors, including the 3 largest weapons manufacturers, 63 shipping and logistics companies that handle 72% of Imperial supply transport, the Central Imperial Bank's mortgage division, 85% of the Empire's communication satellite network. "Impossible," General Kortham sputtered. "Those companies have been Imperial assets for centuries." "Were Imperial assets," Lee So-young corrected politely. She opened her black case and pulled out a stack of documents thicker than a soldier's helmet. All transactions were conducted through perfectly legal channels. Purchase agreements, merger, contracts, debt acquisitions, everything properly filed with the appropriate regulatory agencies. The Emperor's 3 eyes narrowed to blazing slits. "You're lying. No primitive species could have acquired such assets without our knowledge." "Actually," Kim Dae-ho said, "Terrasol Corporation has been quite active in galactic markets for some time. We began with small investments, a fuel depot here, a parts supplier there. Nothing that would attract attention individually." Park Jin-woo's fingers moved across his tablet, and new information appeared on the screen. The process accelerated after first contact with Commander Thexval's forces. Market uncertainty about the Earth situation created excellent buying opportunities. When Imperial military contractors saw potential conflict disrupting their operations, Lee So-young explained, they became eager to sell to stable buyers. Terrasol Corporation offered premium prices for quick transactions. The Emperor's massive form trembled with rage, but Fleet Admiral Nextall stepped forward with confusion written across his scarred face. "Wait, are you saying you bought our military suppliers during our invasion of your world?" "Not during," Kim Dae-ho corrected gently. "Before. We've been preparing for this meeting for quite some time, Admiral. Did you think we wouldn't research our potential business partners?" The chamber fell silent except for the humming of the hologram projectors. The Empire's leadership stared at the humans in growing horror as the implications became clear. Furthermore, Lee So-young continued, Terrasol Corporation holds senior, debt positions in the Imperial Treasury, controlling interests in 12 core world manufacturing centers, and exclusive contracts with your primary food suppliers. She pulled out another document, this one sealed with official stamps. We also hold the mineral rights to the asteroid fields that supply 60% of your shipbuilding materials. Emperor Krexthor's voice dropped to a whisper that somehow seemed more threatening than his loudest roar. What are you saying? Kim Dae-ho stood up from his chair, straightening his tie with the same calm gesture he had used during their first meeting. We're saying, Your Majesty, that Terrasol Corporation is prepared to offer the Galactic Empire a generous acquisition package. Acquisition, the Emperor repeated. A buyout, Park Jin-woo explained helpfully. We believe in preserving existing management structures wherever possible. Most of your current leadership would retain their positions naturally. You're offering to buy the Empire? Commander Thexval asked in disbelief. We're offering to formalize the relationship that already exists, Kim Dae-ho replied. The Empire depends on Terrasol assets for fuel, weapons, communications, food, and raw materials. We simply propose to make this arrangement official. Lee So-young opened her case again and pulled out a contract bound in gold. The terms are quite generous. Full pension plans for all military personnel, healthcare benefits, and a comprehensive profit-sharing program. The hologram of Emperor Krexthor flickered as the truth sank in. The humans hadn't just resisted invasion, they had quietly executed the largest hostile takeover in galactic history. While the Empire's attention was focused on military conquest, these suited warriors had purchased the very foundations of imperial power. You have 36 hours to review the offer, Kim Dae-ho said pleasantly. After that, we'll need to explore alternative arrangements. As the screen went dark, the most powerful beings in the galaxy stood in stunned silence, realizing they had become employees of a species they had come to conquer. 6 months later, the bronze nameplate on Commander Thexval's desk gleamed under the soft office lighting. The words Regional Operations Manager Cygnus Sector were etched in both Galactic Standard and the strange human writing system. His office was smaller than his old command bridge, but the chair was surprisingly comfortable, and the wide window offered a pleasant view of the bustling spaceport below. Thexval adjusted his new uniform, still military in style but made from softer materials and colors that the human consultants called more approachable. The plasma sword that had once hung at his side had been replaced by a communication device and a small tablet computer. Instead of commanding a warship, he now managed shipping schedules and worker satisfaction reports. A soft chime announced an incoming visitor. The door slid open to reveal Kim Dae-ho, still wearing one of his perfectly fitted dark suits. The human entered without waiting for permission, as was his right as chief executive officer of the Terran Galactic Consortium. In his hand he carried a steaming cup of what the humans called coffee. Good morning, Thexval, Kim Dae-ho said, settling into the chair across from the alien's desk. How are you adjusting to the new responsibilities? It is different, Thexval admitted, his mandibles clicking with uncertainty. Yesterday I had to resolve a dispute between cargo handlers and maintenance crews about overtime pay. Last week it was a disagreement over break room temperature settings. Kim Dae-ho nodded sympathetically. Management can be challenging, but I've reviewed your performance reports. Your sector has shown a 12% increase in efficiency since the transition. That's excellent work. Through the office window they could see the transformed spaceport. Imperial warships still patrolled the space lanes, but now they shared the sky with civilian freighters painted in Terrasol colors. Where once there had been only military installations, trading posts and commercial centers had sprouted like flowers after rain. I still don't understand how you did it, Thexval said, leaning back in his chair. 6 months ago we came to conquer Earth. Now the Empire works for humans, and somehow everyone seems happier. Kim Dae-ho sipped his coffee thoughtfully. It's quite simple, really. You came to conquer a world. We offered to manage a galaxy. He gestured toward the window, where Park Jin-woo could be seen supervising the loading of a massive cargo vessel. The former chief financial officer had been promoted to director of interstellar operations, and his efficiency reports were legendary throughout the former empire. Consider the mathematics, Kim Dae-ho continued. Under the old system, the empire maintained control through fear and force. That required enormous resources, fleets, armies, weapons, surveillance networks, all very expensive, and the conquered worlds produced only what they were forced to produce. Thexaval nodded slowly. He remembered the constant rebellions, the endless need for more ships and soldiers to maintain order across thousands of worlds. But under our system, Kim Dae-ho explained, every world has a stake in the success of the whole. Former Imperial subjects are now employees and shareholders. They work harder because they benefit directly from increased productivity. And the military? Thexval asked. Still essential, Kim Dae-ho assured him. But now you're protecting investments instead of suppressing rebellions. Much more efficient use of resources. Through the office's glass walls, they could see Lee So-young leading a group of former Imperial governors through what looked like a training session. The humans called it management development, and it involved learning strange concepts like conflict resolution and employee motivation. What about Emperor Krexthor? Thexaval asked. The former ruler of the galaxy had been notably absent from public view since the transition. Chairman Emeritus Krexthor is adjusting well to retirement, Kim Dae-ho said diplomatically. He has a lovely estate on Risa Prime and spends his time writing his memoirs. We've assigned him an excellent editorial team. Thexaval's communication device chimed with an incoming message. He glanced at the screen and saw a report from one of his subordinate managers. Sir, the Centauri shipping run is ahead of schedule and worker satisfaction ratings are up 8% this quarter. Excellent, Thexval replied, then looked up at Kim Dae-ho with something that might have been admiration. The workers actually seem to enjoy their jobs now. People work better when they're treated well, Kim Dae-ho observed. Revolutionary concept, I know. The human stood up, straightening his tie with the same unconscious gesture he had used during that first meeting on Earth. Speaking of which, there's a staff meeting at 1400 hours. We're discussing expansion into the Andromeda sector. Expansion? Thexval asked. Several independent systems have requested to join the consortium, Kim Dae-ho explained. Apparently word has spread about our employee benefits package. The dental coverage is quite popular. As he reached the door, Kim Dae-ho paused and looked back. Oh, and Thexval. Your performance review is coming up next month. Keep up the good work, and there might be a promotion in your future. We're looking for someone to head up the new Andromeda division. After the human left, Thexval sat quietly in his comfortable chair, watching the busy spaceport through his window. Former Imperial soldiers worked alongside human technicians, loading cargo that would benefit worlds across the galaxy. Where, once there had been the constant threat of rebellion and war, now there was the steady hum of profitable commerce. The galaxy had learned the most important lesson in the universe. Earth's most dangerous warriors didn't carry weapons or command fleets. They wore business suits and carried briefcases, and they had conquered an empire not through force, but by making everyone want to work for them. In the end, the humans had achieved what no military force ever could. They had built an empire that people actually wanted to be part of.